Hello, class. This lecture we'll look at Galatians chapter 5, verses 13 through 15, and it is titled Life Apart from License. So let's look at verse 13. For you were called to freedom, brethren. Now, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So Paul refers to the Galatian believers as brothers. This picks up on the note of confidence he had expressed back in verse 10 of chapter 5. Paul indicated the Galatians had been called by God for a purpose, to be free. The context is to be from the bondage of the Mosaic law. However, Paul knew that freedom is in danger of being undermined by presuming on the grace of God through licentious living. So he knew that. People, take it to mean I can do anything I want. Paul's going to refute that. For you were called to freedom, brethren, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Paul knew that the freedom for which Christ has set his people free can be horribly perverted and misused. The Galatian believers were not free to serve themselves, but rather to serve God and to serve others. So that's what a believer is. We have the choice, as everyone has choices. We can choose to serve God, or we can choose to serve others as God would have us, or we can serve ourselves. And he says this, we shouldn't be serving ourselves. We should be serving God and using that freedom, guided by love, to serve others too. So freedom means service, not license. Freedom exercised by love means to become servants. So who are we to love? We love God with all our heart, all our soul and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said to his disciples, if you the fact that you love one another means that you're a testimony so that the world may know that you're mine. Therefore, Paul charged the Galatians not to use their liberty as a springboard to sin. Flesh refers to fallen human nature, the desires of the flesh, the pride of life, the desires of the eyes. Look at verse 13. For you were called to freedom, brethren, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. That's a repetition of what we just looked at in the previous slide. Had more commentary to add to it, so we see it again. Contrary to being enslaved to the sinful nature, the Galatian believers were to become slaves one to another. Love one another, serve one another. Slavery to one another is voluntary and a source of deep and lasting joy. Fruit of the Spirit. This is possible only when believers are delivered through the presence and power of the Holy Spirit from the necessity of serving sin in our lives. So if the Holy Spirit is enabling us to serve God, then we would produce fruit, and the most important one, or the first one listed, is love. So we should be serving one another in service to God. Verse 14, because the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I kind of got ahead of myself, didn't I? Paul was exhorting the Galatian believers to demonstrate their faith by living a life of holiness. That's spiritual maturity. Become more like Christ. The whole law is fulfilled or summed up in the commandment to love. The law did not provide the capacity, though, to love, but faith through the power of the Spirit does provide the capacity. God's Spirit enables us to love like that instead of loving ourselves. The believer can fulfill the law of love because God sent the Holy Spirit. Thus, the believer's fulfillment of the law will be operative in the keeping of God's commandments, not out of obligation, but out of love, becoming more like Christ. So it's evidence of our faith. Verse 15, but if you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. The churches were divided and engaged in bitter strife, apparently because of the inroads made by these false teachers, the Judaizers. This was far from the biblical ideal of believers dwelling together in a loving unity. The disunity threatened the churches with destruction, the loss of their individual and corporate testimonies. To avoid self-destruction, what the Galatians need to be doing is loving one another. And that concludes this lecture. My sources are Donald Campbell, his commentary on Galatians in the Bible Knowledge Commentary, Timothy George, his commentary on Galatians, a volume in the New American Commentary, John Whitmer and Mal Couch, their commentary on Galatians and Ephesians, and Arnold Fruchtenbaum's book, Faith Alone, The Condition of Our Salvation, an exposition of the book of Galatians. And that concludes this lecture.